Hey guys, tonight we're riding back over 1,000 years to the sun-bleached fjords and frozen moors of Viking Scandinavia. A world where longships ruled the sea, your home was a timber longhouse, and winter stretched longer than your patience. You've heard of fearless raiders and legendary jarls, but what about the ordinary farmers and thralls who keep their fires lit, their bellies full, and lice off their beards? This was a land of hearth fires, sagas sung beside mead bowls, and relentless cold that turned your breath to mist. Warriors trained with axes from childhood, traders braved ice-choked seas in fragile vessels, and a single misstep on deck could send you tumbling into frigid waters. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining this journey from across the world. Now dim the lights, pull your blanket tight, and let's set sail into Viking Scandinavia together. You open your eyes to the acrid scent of last night's fire, and the damp, musty odor of straw beneath you, each breath thick with smoke that clings to your frozen beard and stings your lungs. Your wooden floorboard bed groans under a thin animal skin blanket that shifts as you roll onto your side, exposing goosebump dimpled flesh to the raw chill. Fleas and lice skitter through your dark, tangled hair, their tiny claws scratching an itch you cannot reach. There are no curtains to keep the wind out, no glass in the narrow window slit, just rough-hewn timber walls and thatched reeds rattling overhead. Dawn light, pale and unforgiving, seeps in around the edges of the door. It is already too cold to stay horizontal, so you force yourself upward, letting your hands slide along the splintered post for balance. Your back protests louder than any blow you ever took on a raid, each vertebra popping like an angry joint demanding you never lie down again. You shift your weight onto one leg, fairly certain two are broken somewhere beneath your calf-length wool trousers. You grit your teeth and haul yourself upright, the world tilting beneath you, as if the longship you once sailed had capsized in winter seas. Your breath comes out in ragged puffs of mist that quickly freeze on your whiskers, and you shiver uncontrollably despite the blanket still draped around your shoulders. The hall is silent, except for the distant cackle of a raven and the soft drip of melting icicles outside. Stepping into the main chamber is like walking into a living furnace after a frostbite nightmare. A massive hearth dominates the center, its coals glowing dimly beneath a film of ash. You lift a lump of smoldering wood with a sour groan, pressing it against fresh logs to coax a spark. Smoke coils up around your head, filling your eyes with tears and making you cough until your ribs ache. Each ember flares red behind your vision, illuminating faces huddled in shadow against the far wall. Farmers, thralls, and wanderers, all clad in patched furs, lean against timber benches, clenching thick mugs of mead like life rafts. A bleary-eyed man with a braided beard nods your way and lifts his tankard in silent greeting. Your fingers burn where they grip the hot iron poker, and you drop it with a hiss, dancing back to keep from searing skin. The fire springs to life in a warm roar, chasing back the tendrils of cold from every corner of the hall. You press your cheek to the hearthstone and feel life trickle back into your frozen limbs. Sweat beads on your brow and rushes down your face in rivulets that steam on contact with the air. You rub at your hair and realize it is matted with sweat, soot, and unmentionable debris from last night's feast. You swallow hard and remember the rough grind of barley bread that rattled your teeth before you passed out. Somewhere behind you, a thrall with a missing finger grunts as he drags a deerskin across the floor, shaking loose another cloud of dust and lice. You eye the animal skin draped over your own shoulders and pull it tighter, its coarse hair rasping your neck raw. Your joints crack as you twist to scan the hall. A handful of children, still half asleep, gulp from wooden bowls of lukewarm porridge, their eyes rolling back at the first spoonful. The mead hall's dogs lie curled at the hearth's edge, growling low as they stir from slumber. One of them shakes itself awake, showering you in a spray of ash and hair. Your spine creaks as you stretch, and you catch the eye of the mead hall steward, a hulking woman with an iron circlet and a mischief-laden grin. She points at a pile of split logs by the door and mouths the word breakfast. You nod, trying to look eager, though your stomach still quivers from yesterday's overindulgence and last night's ale. You stumble past benches tacky with spilled mead and scraps of saltfish, careful to avoid stepping on the goat bones littering the dirt floor. Each crunch echoes like a battle cry in your ears. At the entryway, you reach for a length of coarse twine and heave it over a sturdy peg, draping your wet outer cloak so it can drip into a wooden trough. The air is already thick with the stench of sweaty wool and stale smoke, and every breath carries a pinch of ash that you choke back. You grab a length of rough-spun wool from the bench and wrap it around your shoulders, the raw fabric scratching at your skin, but at least trapping a measure of warmth. In the corner, a small fire crackles under a black iron cauldron. You step forward, lift the lid, and peer inside at water so murky it resembles weak broth. You scoop a ladleful and sip it slowly, wincing as the scalding liquid burns your lips. You swallow grit and a stray hair, without flinching. The steward taps you on the shoulder and slides you a wooden bowl of half-cooked barley porridge laced with dried fish flakes. You cradle the bowl, its heat seeping into your frozen fingers, and tilt your head toward the fire once more. You place the bowl in your lap and tuck your elbows into the edge of the table, gorilla style, bracing yourself against a surge of hunger. You close your eyes and shovel in mouthful after mouthful, each spoonful heavier than the last. The porridge slides down your throat in gritty sheets of flour and fish oil. You force a swallow of the iron-tasting water to chase away the aftertaste of grease. You feel the warmth of the fire bloom in your chest and spread down to your belly, dulling the ache of your back and the sting of frostbite on your cheeks. When the bowl is empty, you set it aside with a hollow scrape. You lift your head and see the hall crowded now, with more faces. Burly farmers wrapped in patched leather, wiry traders in oily tunics, elderly storytellers hunched over a single tankard. The smoke has cleared just enough for you to make out carved runes on the wooden posts, protective wards against giants and wicked spirits. You swallow and remind yourself that these are the people you have wedged yourself between to survive in the steppe. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and steel yourself for the next ordeal. You stand, bones popping like distant thunder, and heft your axe and shield from where they lean against a peg. You slide your arm through the leather strap and let the weight settle into muscle memory. You take one final long look around the smoky hall, where embers dance and giants might lurk in every shadow. You let the warmth of the hearth bolster your courage before you step back into the cold dawn, your frozen beard crackling with each breath, ready to face the scouring winds and whatever the day has in store. You step out of the mead hall into a biting wind that knocks the smoke from your beard in sharp gusts. The dawn sky is an angry purple smear above the jagged roofs of timber longhouses clustered around a frozen well. Your cloak is still damp where it dripped in the trough, and it clings to your shoulders like a second skin. You pull the heavy wool tighter around you and follow the steward's glare toward the row of half-frozen livestock penned against a thicket of driftwood logs. Your first task of the day is to fetch water before the sun thaws the ice crust over the well. You set down your bowl of empty barley porridge and shuffle across packed earth that crunches beneath your boots. Each step is an icy trap for your toes. By the time you reach the well, you are already shivering so hard that your knees threaten to give out. You squat on leather pouches stuffed with straw, rest your elbows on your thighs, and peer into the green-black depths of the water. The rope is stiff with ice, and the wooden bucket is frozen to its pulley. You cuff the rope with both hands and break the ice with a furious yank. The bucket crashes back into the well with a roar of cracking ice, and you curse the steward for sending you out here before breakfast instead of the thralls. When the bucket finally returns, you wince at the gutting scream of metal on frozen wood. You lean over, pry it loose, and tip the icy water into a second bucket you carry for washing. You scoop a handful to splash over your face and hair, the cold so sudden it feels like a blow from a frozen fish. Your cheeks burn from the shock, and a sharp crack of pain shoots across your throat. You grit your teeth, rub your temples, and remind yourself that at least you are still alive. You clump back toward the mead hall with 2 buckets sloshing at your sides. Drops of water freeze to the ground in perfect spheres, each one popping like a grain of corn underfoot. You deliver 1 bucket to the steward, who stands inside the doorway, arms folded over a burlap tunic. He nods once, but makes no move to help. You haul the second to the hearth and pour it into a black iron cauldron, sending steam curling up against your frozen nose. The crackle of the fire seems to sigh in relief at the offering. Next, you must tend to the livestock. The sheep stand huddled in a circle around a scrap of moss, their eyes dull with cold hunger. You lift a handful of grain from a woven sack and toss it across the ground. The animals bleat and scramble, legs slipping on icy patches, rushing the feed until they shove and bite each other's flanks. You yank the sack away when they start butting heads too hard, and refill your bowl of mead hall porridge for the steward instead. You hoist the sack onto your shoulder, each grain rattling like a curse, and trudge back to the hall. Inside, the steward is mixing herbs into a thin stew. He slaps the sack down with a grunt and motions you toward the steaming pot. You crouch by the hearth, spoon a portion into your bowl, and knock back another cup of tepid mead to wash it down. The stew is half-coagulated swill and barley husks that scrape your tongue like broken bone. You swallow each mouthful with the solemnity of a funeral rite and refuse to let your grimace show. Now, clothed in damp wool, belly aching, you move to your next duty. The longhouse doors creak open, and a herd of scrawny goats stumbles inside, bells jingling on leather collars. You herd them between benches, pushing them toward a trough carved of oak. They press their horns into your shins and nibble at stray pieces of your cloak. You slap at their necks, yell low insults in the old tongue, and try not to topple under their weight. The goats grunt in defiance, and you realize that training animals is as futile as training sea waves. With goats settled, you grab a sharpened knife from a wooden rack and set to cleaning fish. The catch from last night hangs from a wolf-bone hook over a wooden plank. The scales glint in the firelight as you slice through the corpses, severing heads that roll across the planks with a final gurgle. You rip out the guts, scrape the bones, and rinse the slabs in the steaming water you drew earlier. The smell of raw fish and blood assaults you until you gag and lean back, head spinning. You force a deep breath, taste copper on your tongue, and press on until each piece is ready for drying. Your hands shake from cold and fatigue, and you miss a slice, nicking your palm. Blood wells up, and you curse again, wrapping the cut with a scrap of linen from your cloak. The wound stings, and your vision blurs at the edges. You blink away spots of red, and remind yourself that this is daily life. There is no one to bind you to a bed when you bleed. You push through the pain, gritting your teeth, and humming a half-forgotten chant to keep your mind from spinning. Just as you finish the last fish, you hear the cry of an alarm horn from the watchtower. A single sharp blast that echoes across the fjord. You freeze, the knife still in your hand, and strain to hear the answer. The steward drops the porridge bowl and yanks his cloak tight. You realize that raiders or worse may be approaching. The longhouse door slams open behind you as the steward bellows orders. You find your axe and shield leaning against a post. You grasp them both and sprint toward the hall's entrance, each breath a cloud of frost. Outside, riders pour from the gate, spears bristling like a hedgehog of iron. The sun is now a pale disk on the horizon. Ice drips from eaves in plinking arcs. Your boots skid on the frozen ground as you position yourself behind a wagon loaded with supplies. Your heart hammers so hard that each beat echoes in your ears. You raise your shield and axe, and let the steward drag you forward, crouched among farmers, rigged for battle. You taste fear on your tongue, and taste it again, as the horn sounds another warning. Ahead, across the pale field, shapes coalesce in the morning, light dark figures on horseback, glinting swords, banners snapping. Your breath freezes in your lungs, as you realize these are no neighboring farmers with grudges. These are strangers bearing the mark of Odin, foreigners, or perhaps worse. You swallow the lump in your throat and grip your axe tighter. Your frozen beard quivers, and your knuckles whiten on the wood handle. You find the courage only survival demands, and step forward into the chill dawn, ready to face whatever fury the steppe hurls at you this day. You push aside the blackened flap of the mead hall door and step into the low morning light that slants through smoke-darkened timbers. A long trestle table runs down the center of the hall, its surface scarred by axes and knives, stained with spilled mead and grease. At one end sits the Jarl on a simple wooden stool, his cloak still heavy with last night's dew. His eyes flick toward you as you approach, clutching a chipped wooden bowl. You take a hunk of barley flatbread from a straw-lined basket. It is dense and tough, like a broken roof tile left out in the rain. You lift it to your teeth and bite down hard enough to feel the grain splinter under you. Your jaw creaks as you chew, and you grit your teeth against the taste of dust and stale ash. Tiny fragments of bread flake off into your mouth, and you swallow grit along with the meager crumbs. You force yourself to chew each bite until you can swallow without swallowing half the shard of crust. Beside the bread, you see strips of salted, dried fish laid out on a worn wooden board. The flesh is pale and stiff like memory. You pick up one of the strips and sniff it. The scent of salt and brine burns your nostrils. You bring it to your lips and bite. The flesh cracks beneath your teeth, and flakes become lodged in your throat, sending a stiff bristle of pain up your windpipe. You swallow and feel 1,000 tiny barbs scratch at your tongue. You swallow again, and a piece of bone chips loose a molar. You taste copper where your gum splits open, and you press your tongue to the roof of your mouth to stop the flow. A thrall at the table slides you a cup of mead. Steam rises from the sweet drink that has been watered down with ice melt drawn from a frozen creek. You lift the cup to your lips and hesitate. The liquid is tepid and sour. It glugs over your tongue with a faint fizz. You swallow and feel the watery sweetness clash with the salt of your teeth. You gag at a cold drop of mead that trickles down your chin. You wipe it away on your woolen sleeve and glance at the Jarl. He raises his cup to his lips without concern for your suffering. You lean forward and run the side of your tongue along the inside of your cheek to scrape away the bone splinter. You press a fingertip to your gum and taste blood and brine together. You swallow and take another bite of bread to drive away the metallic tang. You crunch down despite the ache because refusing to eat in the Jarl's hall would be an insult punishable by public shame or worse. You swallow half a shard of fish and scowl at the meager breakfast laid before you. Around you the others eat in grim silence. Some hoe farmers pressed into service during winter raids, others are seasoned veterans of the Jarl's expeditions. They chew with stoic faces that betray no regret, no pity, no hunger. A dog lies beneath the table stealing crumbs when he thinks no one is watching. You glance at the Jarl's guard at the table's end, a hulking man with a braided beard and a bronze arm ring. His spear leans at his side, and his eyes never leave you. You realize that every swallow you take is a concession to survival and to the will of those who hold power. You force another bite of the hard bread into your mouth and press your back against the rough plank bench to steady yourself. The bread tastes of dust and old fires. You chew until your jaw throbs and swallow with difficulty. You chase it with a mouthful of fish, but it only makes the taste more acrid. You reach out and fill your cup again with mead, hoping the sweet liquid will wash away the grit and bone, but it is still cold and thin. You raise the cup to your lips and drain it in one motion. The mead slides down your throat and warms your chest momentarily before the cold returns. You smack your lips and set the cup down with a thud. A blade-scratched groove in the bench edge cuts your thigh as you shift. You tug your tunic down and ignore the sting. You glance at the pile of bread fragments and fish skins at the center of the table. They grow smaller by the minute, but the hunger in your belly remains a hollow ache. You remember the spring barley fields you tilled last summer, the sweat on your skin, the sun on your shoulders, and you wonder if you would trade this life for that one again. Then you remember the raids, the burned villages, the dead friends, and you swallow hard against regret. You scoop a final mouthful of bread into your fingers, hold it between two fingers, and let it drip mead lightly before biting. The bread is slightly softer now that it has soaked a moment. You feel the edges crumble less harshly, and you chew more easily. You smile a little as the softened crust gives way, and you swallow without tasting dust. It feels like progress. Across the table, a trader with a weather-cracked face scoops fish into his own bowl and looks at you. He eyes your bandaged hand left from last week's raid. You nod curtly and he offers you a strip. He holds a spear in his other hand. You accept. His fish is chewier than yours, but at least it flakes less, like broken glass. You bite into it and feel the texture give once before you swallow. You swallow grit again, but the trade-off is worth the fewer bone shards. The Jarl stands and booms an order. The hall falls silent. You rise on aching legs and rest your bowl on the bench. You feel the sting of frozen sweat crusting the hairs on your cheeks. You glance around and see the others pick up similar bowls of porridge, thickened with dried fruit or goat cheese, if they are fortunate. Your bowl is empty. He wants you to move on to the next task without complaint. You drain the last drop of mead from your cup and set it aside. You glance at the steam rising from the hearth and feel its warmth encourage you one last time. You look at the Jarl again and he nods. You have eaten enough. You have survived breakfast. You step back and leave the hall behind you, the cold air biting at your neck and wrists. You carry the stiff bowl in one hand and tuck your other hand into your belt. Where a strip of bread remains, you will save it for later. You step onto the chopped stone floor just outside the door, the dawn chill sharper now that you have left the firelight. You raise your collar against the wind and dip your head toward the farm sheds where the next chores await. Your stomach still grumbles, but your jaw no longer aches quite so badly. You tuck the bowl under your arm. You clench your fist around the bit of bread. You turn to face the day. You lift your empty bowl from the table and cradle it in one hand as you stand. The crowd at the trestle bench murmurs as they finish their own meager rations. The lanterns overhead flicker low, leaving the far end of the hall shrouded in soot-dark shadow. You press your thumb into the wood-carved rim of the bowl and taste the mead residue. It's a thin scrap of warmth in your fingers. You lick it clean despite the bitter tang that lingers on your tongue. Behind you, the steward sweeps a handful of crumbs and fish skins from the table with a crude scraper. The scrape of wood on stone echoes through the hall. Fleas leap from the scrap pile into the firelight. You stiffen, but no one else spares the tiny beasts a thought. The Jarl's guard stands by the door, arms crossed over his chest, eyes like flint. You divert your gaze to the flagged stone floor, wet from sloshed mead and drippings of porridge. Each step sends water and gristle sloshing across your boots. You duck your head so that the Jarl does not catch you studying him. He stares into the flickering hearth with an expression as unreadable as carved stone. A place of warmth for you now feels like a cage. You let yourself imagine the outside sunrise, pale and ruthless, promising frostbitten cheeks and numb fingers. Better that cold than this choking stench of fish sweat and burnt barley. The thralls begin to rise from their benches. Their shoulders are hunched and their tunics are stiff with last night's grime. They will be hauling logs, draining fish traps, mending nets. You follow their lead. You sling your empty bowl behind your belt and slip past the guard's spear point. The moment your feet touch the chill of the packed earth beneath the doorframe, your body shivers again. You step into the courtyard where pack horses huddle under a shelter of planks. Smoke from the hall's hearth drifts out the open doorway, mixing with the morning mist. You dodge a lean goat that scampers past you, horns clacking against the wooden posts. It bleats once before bolting into a scrawny dog, sending the animal yelping across the mud. You flip a glance at the stalls where foals stamp their legs and horses nick in hunger. Your first chore is to carry water to the forging shed. You retrieve the bucket you left by the hearth and follow a thrall toward the well. Each step you take feels heavier than the last. The bucket is half filled with ice-cold water that rattles against the sides as you walk. When you finally lift it by its rope handle, your fingers burn from the raw chill. You grit your teeth and tuck the handle under your arm to spare your hand further agony. At the forge, you tip the bucket into a trough and call out to the smith. He is a mountain of a man with arms thick as tree trunks. He nods without looking up from the glowing iron he pounds on an anvil. Sparks shower your boots with orange embers that hiss out on contact with the ice crust beneath your feet. You shuffle back to the well for another bucket and curse your luck at being chosen for such a thankless task immediately after breakfast. By the third trip, your legs protest, and your water-soaked cloak sticks to your back like a wet sheet. You can taste the fish vinegar mingled with metal in the water and the porridge dust in the air. You force yourself to take one more bucket despite the sting in your shoulders and the cold burning your lungs. After you deliver the final bucket, you are ordered to carry chopped firewood to the hall. You grab a small armful of splintered logs and stagger back toward the warmth. Each log is heavy from frozen sap that drips in thick black droplets onto the ground. When you reach the door, you stumble, nearly dropping your load. The guard's spear tip nudges your back, and you hasten inside. The hall's fire roars to life at your approach, steam rising from every log you lay on the hearth. You kneel to pick up your empty bowl, but the steward has already swept it aside. Instead, he thrusts a rough-spun rag in your hand. It has been dipped in warm water to wipe the tables. You snatch it and begin to scrub the mead ring stains from the wood. The rag is coarse and smells of old fish oil. Your hands prickle as you rub, the grain of the wood scoring your skin. You rinse the rag in the trough by the door, dunking it again and again until the water turns a dark brown. A boy tumbles in, half asleep, clutching a wooden platter of goat cheese and dried berries. He barks your name without looking at you. You lift your eyes and see the platter wobbling in his arms. He spills half the cheese onto the floor before you can catch it. You crouch to scoop it up, and a shard of rind cuts your palm open. Blood wells at the nick, and you press the rag over the cut, tasting metal on your tongue. You grit your teeth and finish wiping the bench. The rag is now soaked and stiff. You drop it in a bucket of water to soften, splashing the sides and knocking over the pail. Water spills across the floor in dark rivulets that trickle toward the hearth. You curse under your breath, but do not dare to complain aloud. The Jarl's laughter rumbles from his seat at the end of the hall. He watches you with amusement as you mop and stumble. You force yourself to meet his gaze. He nods once, a faint sign of approval in his stone-cold eyes. You drop the broom and stand, hands now trembling from cold water and exhaustion. Your stomach roils as the porridge dust and fish bones settle in new pools of acid. You place a fist against your belly and swallow hard. You realize that despite the meager breakfast and the chores and the cuts you have just endured, your hunger remains a low gnaw. You glance at the warm hearth and long for a cup of mead, but you dare not ask. Instead, you step back into the courtyard, where the morning sun has burned away some of the frost. You rub your hands together and let the few remaining embers of warmth linger. You glance at the longship moored beyond the pier, its bow rising and falling on the frigid water. You know that soon you will be ordered to push off into the fjord, to face the endless grey wave and the rime-choked wind. But for now you stand among the logs and the trough and the goat droppings, your stomach aching in protest, your palms still bleeding, your bowl long since emptied. You let the sun feel on your face, a momentary mercy, before you turn toward the hall once more to continue the day's grim routine. You step out of the longhouse into a white world so silent the only sound is the crunch of snow beneath your boots. The sky is a pale slate grey, and the pine trees stand like sentinels draped in heavy snow. Your breath puffs in front of you in clouds that vanish in an instant. You pull your woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders and trudge toward the stream, each step sinking knee-deep into powder so cold it feels like 1,000 tiny knives against your legs. Your linen shift drags wet with yesterday's sweat and snow. You swallow against the lump in your throat and force yourself onward. After 100 ragged paces, you reach the bank where the ice ends and water roars over hidden stones. A ragged hole in the ice gapes like a black mouth waiting to swallow you. Steam rises where the water meets the air in angry tendrils. You set your cloak and shift on a fallen log, each piece of clothing stiff with frost. Your boots stick to the wood as if glued. You pull them off one at a time and shake out the snow. Your toes burn whenever they meet the cold air. You stand in your shift, shivering already, the thin linen clinging to your legs. Your heart hammers against your ribs as you stare into the swirling current. The wind cuts across the clearing in sharp gusts that whip through your hair and bite your skin. You grit your teeth and step forward, each foot sliding on the icy bank. A single misstep sends pain up your spine. You bend and plunge into the hole, water searing your calves like fire. The roar of the stream fills your ears, and you gasp. The cold steals your breath, and your lungs contract in sudden shock. You kick backward until your shoulders are submerged, water crashing against your chest. Your teeth chatter like wood blocks in a forge. You fling your arms to keep from slipping under. The current tugs at your shift, pressing it tight against your skin. You gasp and fight the urge to curl into a ball. You beat the water with your hands until you find a shallow shelf beneath the surface. You press your toes against rocky ground and lurch upright. Your skin erupts in goosebumps that feel like spider legs crawling over your flesh. You raise one arm and slip your hand under the ice fringe. Each finger freezes solid where it touches the rim. You rip your hand back and let out a sound somewhere between a howl and a sob. You grit your teeth and steel yourself for the next step. You lift your shift and use your teeth to unlace the waistband of your trousers. Each movement sends fresh torrents of icy spray across your back. You grip the bar of sheep fat soap the steward pressed into your hand a moment ago. It is slick and clumped with dirt and ash. You hold it tight and lather your arm until the skin beneath bubbles red and raw. You rub the soap in long strokes down your chest and back. The sting of the fat soap on scrubbing skin makes you curse under your breath. You press the jagged edge of your whittled wood scraper against your arm and drag it down. The skin comes away in strips of lather and grime. Blood wells where the scraper digs too deep. You taste copper on your tongue and pause. You peer at the crimson beads on your arm, then press on. You scrape your shoulders, ribs, and thighs until your skin feels tender and scalded. Each scrape brings a fresh wave of numb agony. You gasp for air that feels like splinters in your lungs. The stream's roar mingles with your ragged breathing until you are sure the world will shatter. At last, you ease the soap and scraper from your hands and hold your arms out to the sky. The wind slashes at your shoulders. Water droplets freeze on your eyelashes and fall like tiny ice shards onto your cheeks. You lean back into the current and let it wash the soap away. The cold feels like truth. It strips away every last trace of dirt, sweat, and fear. You taste freedom in the raw sting of the water. When you can bear the cold no longer, you backpedal onto the bank. Your legs tremble so hard they threaten to buckle. You haul yourself up by a frost-covered tree trunk and snap your teeth together to chase away the tears. You reach for your linen shift and wrap it around your chest, the damp fabric rough against your skin. You stomp your feet to chase away the pins and needles. You hug your arms across your body and shiver violently. You stagger back to the fallen log and grab your cloak. You yank it on in a single desperate motion, the wool heavy and scratchy. You wrap it around your shoulders twice, and knot the ends at your throat. The moment the cloak settles, you feel a measure of warmth flood your bones. You press your palms to the chest of the cloak and breathe deeply, savoring the faint scent of lanolin and sweat. You lean against the log, chest heaving, ice crystals forming at your hairline. The world tilts softly around you as your muscles unclench. You stare into the swirling water, suddenly alive with exhilaration and pain. Your skin burns so fiercely that every breath feels like a brand. Yet beneath the agony, you feel something fierce and clear. You taste courage in the cold. You pull off your shift, wring it out, and lay it on a nearby rock to dry in the passing dawn light. You step into your trousers and boots, your limbs stiff and aching. You tug the cloak more tightly and turn toward the longhouse. Each step a triumphant claim on life itself. The day awaits with its chores and battles, but right now, you are whole, you are real, you are more alive than you have been in your life. You pick up your shift, fold it roughly, and jam it under your belt next to the chipped bowl from breakfast. You pass the goats, snuffling in the yard, and the pile of logs waiting for splitting. You pause a moment and let the memory of the stream's roar echo in your mind. You carry that echo with you as you march back into the cold world. You are clean, you are awake, and you are ready for whatever the Viking dawn will demand next. You press your back against the rough bark of a pine stump and close your eyes, feeling your heart pound in your ears. The world is a rush of cold and warmth that fights for space on your skin. You taste pine sap on your lips and feel the sting of the wind tugging at your damp hair. You wrap your cloak tighter and let your eyes drift open. The sky is paler now, the wind gentler, as if even the air is recovering from last night's storm. Your body aches from the freeze and the scrapes, your chest still burns where the stream washed over bruises and old scars. You lift one arm to your nose and inhale the faint, smoky scent of last night's fire mingled with snow melt and sheep fat. You lean toward a pile of driftwood split for kindling and press your cloak into the softest part of the wood. The rough fibers catch at the wool, snagging bits of frozen fleece that cling to your cloak. You drop to one knee and remove your belt, loosening the cloth straps that hold your trousers in place. Each movement sends fresh jolts of pain up your spine. You shrug out of your wet shift and let it fall in a sodden heap on the snow. You lift your cloak overhead and shake it once, sending a small avalanche of powdery white from its folds. You drape it over the log again and stand upright, blinking at the brightness of the waterlogged linen. Your trousers fall to your ankles and you peel them off, leaving you in your undershift. The shivering that began in the stream returns with a vengeance, rattling your teeth and buckling your knees. You wrap one arm around your chest and keep your other hand pressed to your belly, as if warding off the cold. Your skin feels raw, each pore a gaping mouth, inhaling winter's bite. You hear footsteps crunching toward you and look up to see the Jarl's guard stride across the yard. His boots are thick and his cloak is lined with fur. He nods curtly, his breath a plume of smoke that drifts away on the wind. You nod back, your fingers still clutching at your shift. You watch him draw near, waiting for whatever mockery or command he will offer. Instead, he simply tosses you a length of coarse linen and spins on his heel to rejoin the others. You catch the linen before it drops and wrap it around your shoulders like a shroud. You tie the ends beneath your chin and tug at the folds until only your eyes, nose, and mouth are exposed. The makeshift cloak traps enough body heat to still the tremors. You press your cheek against the wool and breathe, tasting the grain of the fabric against your lips. Your next task is to reapply grease to protect your skin from frostbite and windburn. You reach for a lidded wooden box tucked in the snow at your feet. Inside is a lump of sheep, fat strained of bristles. You push your fingers into the soft mass and scoop out a handful. The fat is cool and slick, gliding between your fingers in a greasy smear. You press it against your skin and rub it in circular motions, working from your cheeks down to your collarbones. Each circle brings a fresh wave of warmth that fights the sting of the breeze. You move methodically, coating every exposed patch of skin in a thin layer of grease. You smear it across your shoulders and collar and press it into the nape of your neck. You draw your cloak tighter around your head, sealing the edges of the linen to trap the grease beneath. The fat leaves a faint smell of lanolin and cooked meat on the air, a lingering reminder of your own living warmth. With your skin greased and your cloak in place, you turn your attention to your hair. You kneel by the log and retrieve a small comb carved from bone. The teeth of the comb are worn and uneven, stained dark by sweat and soap scum. You lift a fistful of hair and begin to comb through the tangles. Each pull sends a sharp pinch through your scalp. You grit your teeth and press on, yanking the comb through knots that no bath or scraper could loosen. From time to time you pause and flick away clumps of matted hair that have been shed by your head. The handfuls of hair rest in the snow like defeated birds. You press the comb against your scalp and scrape again, searching for any remaining bits of soap or grime. You wonder if this is truly clean, or merely a new state of filth. When the comb no longer snags, you lift your hand and brush off the last flakes of hair from the bone. You tuck the comb into a pocket of your shift and pat down the front of your hair to smooth the wild tufts into something resembling order. The wind tugs at your newly tamed locks, loosening stray strands that whip across your brow. You press your fingers against your forehead to hold the hair back. A glaucous haze hangs over the fields now, the sun hidden behind a sheet of clouds. You wrap your cloak firmly around you and rise to your feet. The world looks different through your own cleaned eyes. The glare of the snow sharpened and the forest lines crisp against the sky. Your breath puffs once more, not in shock but in resilience. You step forward to retrieve your shift and pause for a moment to let the new sensations settle in your bones. You feel a strange lightness in your chest and a keen awareness in your limbs. The bitter cold no longer feels like death. It feels like proof of life. You smile to yourself, a crooked flash of white teeth that sting with cold and adrenaline. You slide your shift back on, tugging the damp linen over your head and letting it cling to your skin. The fabric feels tight, but you welcome the snugness. You fasten the ties at your neck and waist. You press your hands across your belly and rub in gentle circles, massaging warmth back into the muscles that froze during the plunge. You pat your sides and let the grease and heat mingle beneath the layers of cloth. With your shift replaced, you retrieve your trousers and pull them on. The wool stretches around your thighs and calves. You hike them up and sweat beads at the small of your back where they rub. You step into your boots once more, the leather soft from last night's warming fire. You tie the laces and pull the breeches over the tops, sealing out as much snow as the cuffs will allow. You lift your cloak from the log and shake it free of excess snow and stray hair. You drape it across your shoulders and adjust the linen wrap so that only your eyes poke out. You look at your gloved hands, noticing that the frigid numbness has receded to a dull ache. You open and close your fists, letting warmth flood back to your fingertips. A thrall passes by, carrying an armload of split logs to the hearth. He nods at you, his breath ragged with exertion. You nod back, feeling kinship in the shared misery of the cold dawn chores. You step off the log and pack the shift into your belt under the cloak, securing it so it will not slip free. You lean into the wind and test its strength. It presses you back a step and whispers through the forest. You raise your face to the sky, letting the wind caress your cheeks, now greased and protected. You breathe in deep, as if the very air can renew you. You feel alive with purpose. You taste pine and snow and the faint tang of blood from your scraped arms. You taste victory in simple survival. The steward's horn sounds in the distance, a resonant blast that carries across the yards. It is the call to work. You know the next tasks await. Mending sails, gathering firewood, hauling fish. You brush a handful of snow from your cloak and step forward, your cloak swirling, your heart alight, ready to face the next trial of the Viking dawn. You step away from the stream with the taste of cold pine and grease still clinging to your mind and body. The steward's horn has fallen silent, but you know the next task waits. You head toward the longhouse, storing your shift and cloak on a bench splintered from rough timber. Your fingers fumble with frozen fabric as you fold the linen and lay it aside. Across the floor, you spot the stack of woolen cloaks and linen tunics sorted for each man and thrall. You reach for a heavy wool cloak first. It is thicker than any blanket you have known, dyed the dull grey of storm clouds and lined with coarse fur at the neck. You drape it over your shoulders and let the weight settle into your muscles. The wool felts against your skin in rough patches, each fibre a tiny knife against your arms. You steady yourself against the log bench as the cloak drags on the floor, tugging at your wrists. Next, you slip one arm through the linen tunic saved for cold mornings. The fabric is stiff with damp and sweat and shakes loose flecks of ash. You lift your other arm and tug the tunic down over your chest. The neckline scrapes your collarbone and the cloth bunches under your belt, pulling tight around your waist. You step side to side, testing the tug, and feel the linen bite into your lower ribs. Still, you welcome the layer of warmth it provides against the wind. A bronze brooch glints on the bench. You lift it and grasp its pin between calloused fingers. You press the pin through the cloak's fur collar and twist it to lock the cloak in place. The metal presses into your flesh, and the cold metal stings like an insult. You adjust the brooch to sit higher, and the cloak falls in heavy folds around your legs. You clamp a second brooch to hold the other side together, closing the wool around your chest into a makeshift mantle. Your next challenge is the boots. A pair of leather boots stands waiting at the door, crudely tanned and still stiff from autumn's bath in river water. The leather crackles as you bend down and slip your foot inside. Your toes jam into the narrow toe box, and the leather stretches only where it chooses. You sit on the bench and yank the laces tight, each tug pulling the leather seams taut until your feet burn. You tie the final knot and stand, ankles locked in rough straps. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, trying to coax the leather to soften. Each step brings a fresh pinch as the boots bite into your skin at the arch and heel. You grit your teeth and press forward, forcing the boots to give. Your trousers pull and wrinkle under the leather cuffs, waving in the chill breeze that slips through the open doorway. Despite the pain, you know these boots will keep your feet from frostbite when you trek across frozen fields. Behind the boots waits a woolen hood the color of raven wings. You lift it and slip it carefully over your head, the inside soft with goat hair but the edges rough against your neck. You pull the hood down until only your face peeks out from its circular opening. The wool rubs at your throat each time you turn your head. You grit your teeth against the chafe and press your chin against your breastbone to protect your skin. You glance at your reflection in a pool of melted water pooled by the hearth. The heavy cloak frames your shoulders like the edge of a dark sea. The linen tunic juts out below the mantle, its folds stiff and angular. The boots cinch your legs into rigid pillars. The hood throws your face into shadow, highlighting the gaunt lines on your cheeks. You barely recognize the figure staring back, yet something fierce shines in your eyes. You lift your arms and feel the cloak's sleeves catch at your elbows. You spread your cloak wide, and the edges sweep the floor in curved arcs. You fold your arms into the folds of the mantle and breathe deeply. The weight of the layers presses down on your chest and shoulders until each breath feels like a pact of endurance. You test, lifting one foot as if walking across the courtyard, and feel your cloak snag on the doorframe. You pull back and free the cloak with a grunt. You balance on one leg and hook your heel around the hem of the cloak. The wool grips the wood, and you twist your foot until the cloak slides free. You step forward, and the cloak settles into place, its bulk shifting like a small beast at your back. You press your hands against your hips and rub across your sternum where the layers converge in a tight bundle. Your boots protest with each movement, squeaking against the wooden floor. You shift your stance, and the leather flexes at the ankle, sending a stab of pain through your heel. You grit your teeth and push on, forcing your boots to buckle and bend. You walk a dozen steps in place, each footstep heavy, each ankle joint creaking like a rotten hinge. You think of the men who carved runes on stones in the sun, or sang at feasts without adopting such burdens. But this is the life you chose, or the life chosen for you. This is what it means to stand against the wind, and snow, and cold. You breathe in, and taste wool, and sweat and tanned leather. You exhale and let out a low hiss of air that fogs the pool of water. You lift your gaze to the rafters above and track a spider inching across a beam, undisturbed by your presence or your garb. You lift one hand and tug at the bronze brooch. It clinks against your cloak as you adjust it again. You test the hood and let it fall back to rest at the base of your neck. You slip your fingers beneath the wool edge and feel the damp chill against your hairline. You tug the hood back into place and press your palm against your forehead, feeling the loops of wool tighten around your brow. Your trousers strain at the thighs and hips, the wool fraying at the seams. You kneel and inspect the hem. You tug it downward, but it barely moves. You stomp your foot once, twice, to coax the cloth to shift. It rubs against your leggings and the friction squeaks. You stand and pat at the folds to smooth them out. The trousers settle, still heavy, still damp, still necessary. You feel the brute weight of the mantle, and know that there is no escape. The cloak will soak up frost and snow until you either dry it by the hearth or wear it like a frozen shell. The linen will cling to your sweat until it turns cold and clammy. The boots will shape your gait until you walk like a puppet. The hood will stifle your breath until you learn to breathe through your nose. Yet in that realization, you feel a spark of defiance. You are dressed not to be comfortable, but to survive. You are armored in wool, linen, and leather, shielded from the worst that winter can throw at you. You are ready to face the biting wind, the scouring snow, the endless chores of smoke and ash and ice. You rise fully and stretch your arms above your head, feeling the cloak lift slightly, the linen pull at your shoulders, the boots tighten around your calves. You spread your legs and bend your knees to test your balance. You feel the layers shift, the weight settle around your body, the pinch of leather and the bite of wool. You tuck your hands into the cloak sleeves and step toward the doorway. The steward's horn has sounded again. The thralls wait for orders. The horses bump into the fence. The ravens call from the rafters. The snow crunches beneath your boots in perfect rhythm with your heartbeat. You exhale and let the cold taste of readiness settle in your lungs. You step through the doorway and into the courtyard. The wind greets you like an old rival, shaking the cloak and hood until they flap like a banner. The linen under tunic billows beneath the cloak, and your boots sink into the snow. You raise your head and meet the steely sky. You feel the roughness of wool against your cheeks, the tightness of leather around your feet, the damp weight of every garment pulling at your limbs. But you do not hesitate. You plant your feet and move forward into the frozen morning, dressed in wool, linen, and twisted leather, prepared for every cut, every gust, every trial this land can muster. You step out into the courtyard again, the wool cloak settling around your shoulders like a living weight. The linen underacre tunic clings damp to your skin, where sweat and grease have soaked through. Your leather boots crackle against the ice-setcher-packed ground, each step accompanied by a muffled groan. The morning sun is still low, a pale slit on the horizon, and frost clings to every railing and tool. Ahead of you stands a neat pile of split logs, each chunk waiting to be stacked by the hearth. You bend at the waist and grab the first log. It is colder than any stone you have touched, its bark stiff with ice. The weight of the wool and leather pulls you forward as you lift it. Your back protests in low, angry pops, but you force the log onto your shoulder. The cloak shifts and pinches where the bronze brooches sit. You grit your teeth and shake out the struggling wool so it does not snag on the rough bark. With the log balanced, you stride toward the hearth, the leather boots pinching at your toes with every step. You place the wood against last night's embers and hear the coals crack with relief. You don't pause to admire the fire or to enjoy warmth. You pivot on one heel and return for another log. Each trip across the yard tests your endurance and your tunic's capacity to trap cold against your skin. After the 10th load, you stagger to a crooked bench and lean against it, letting the weight of the cloak droop from your shoulders. You push aside the hood and shake out your hair. releasing a small cloud of snow. Your boots feel like clamps crushing your feet. You tug at the laces until you draw blood across your insteps. You press a fist to the wound and grit your teeth until the ache dulls to an annoying throb. Your next duty calls you to the lapping docks, where your longship rests in icy water. You trudge down the slope, cloak fluttering, cloak pinches, linen rubs. Each step is an advance through knee-80 deep snow until your trousers collect enough ice that they pull at your knees. You reach the ship and see that the sail must be unfurled and dried before another voyage. Climbing the companionway ladder tests every stitch of your clothing. You teeter on each rung as the wind presses against your wool and flaps your under-aqua tunic like a sail. Halfway up, you stop to catch your breath, pressing your palm to your chest where the cloak holds you too tight. You untuck a corner of linen beneath the belt and draw in a shaky breath. When you dare to look down, you realize how far you have climbed without support. You force your legs to carry you the last few rungs until you step onto the deck. The sail lies draped over the yardarm, a massive slab of canvas stiff with ice and salt. You loop your arm under the folds and tug until a section frees. Canvas resists like an angry beast. You push through with bare forearms and the wool at your sleeves, bunches and scratches at your wrists. A small spray of brine drips from the sail onto your cloak, then slides off in an icy bead. You carry the canvas bundle down the ladder and lay it on the dock to thaw by the fire you lit earlier. Cold clings to your limbs, but so does sweat beneath your layers. You reach under your cloak and find the small pouch of dried fish you tucked away at breakfast. You chew on a couple of pieces despite the lingering grit. The fish offer little flavor beyond salt and determination. You swallow and continue on to the next task before your muscles remember the ache. You arrive at the smithy where the fire rages hotter than any summer sun. The iron glows molten red on the anvil. You move closer, letting the heat scorch your hood until the inside crackles. You know the cloth beneath will catch fire if you linger. You grip a pair of tongs handed to you by the burly smith and clamp them around a length of glowing metal. The moment you lift the iron, the weight of your cloak and hood drags at your balance. You stagger back, nearly dropping the tongs into the coals. The smith snarls and snaps the iron free, yanking you closer to reprime your grip. You turn the iron rod over in your grip and watch it lose its glow. Each rotation brings a fresh sting as sparks shower your boots. You clamp a hammer in your free hand and bring it down on the rod. The impact shakes your arms through the wool and leather, joints rattling like loose chain links. You hammer 2 more blows before the smith nods and takes the iron away, leaving you to wipe sweat and soot from your brow with the back of your hand. Your under tunic is clotted with ash, your cloak is scorched at the sleeves, and your hood is stiff with soot. You taste metal on your tongue and feel the ache in your shoulders settle into a dull burn. You turn and follow the smith's nod toward a stack of shields waiting to be repaired. Each shield is made of overlapping planks held together with bent iron. The wood is splintered from last year's raid. You heft one shield and press it against your torso. The leather straps dug into your forearms and pulled at your cloak. You thread your hand through the first strap and tug it tight. Your fingers fumble with the second strap because the wool at your cuffs catches in the buckle. You bite back a curse and yank your sleeve free, risking frostbite on your bare skin. With both straps fastened, you swing the shield onto your back and bend to inspect the damage. You pull forward a section of cracked plank and scrape at the broken wood. Splinters spill onto the dock like sawdust. You trace the fracture lines with a koala soot finger and nod. You lift the shield off your back and reset it on the bench. You grab a handful of rawhide thongs from a bucket and begin to weave them through broken planks. Each tug requires more force than the last because the rawhide is slick with grease. Your cloak brushes the rawhide and catches in a knot. You pause to untangle it, yanking bits of wool free from the binding. Each bit you free pulls an angry thread. You brush at the fabric and watch a tiny cloud of gossamer fibers float away. You feel the shield buck in your grasp and push it back against the bench. You finish lacing the rawhide and tie a knot that you hope will hold through the next storm. The sun has climbed higher now and your layers feel heavier with fatigue. Your boots hold damp snow against your feet, your linen under a tunic mops up sweat that cools into clammy cold. Your cloak drapes lifeless and sodden. Still you stand and pick up another shield. You glance at the longship docked beyond the smithy, the thawing sail spread out on the wood. Soon you will be called to row or to stand guard. You press your palm against the shield's surface and feel the rough wood under your grease-smudged fingers. You taste ash and salt in your mouth. You let the weight of the shield settle onto your back and look down the dock. You realize that dressing in layers was only the beginning. Now each movement must negotiate cloth and leather, wool and metal, bone and sinew. Every task you perform captures a struggle not only with wind and cold and ice, but with your own clothing. And yet, you would not trade this life for any other, because each mended shield, each dried sail, each split log is a testament to survival. You lift your gaze and fix it on a distant point beyond the fog. You lift the shield from its place on the bench and clamp the straps around your arms. You pivot on one foot and step down the dock, cloak swaying, boots creaking, tunic bunching. You carry the shield like a burden you have already conquered. You breathe in and out, wind and smoke and cold and sweat mingling at your nostrils. You take the next step and carry the shield into the uncertain morning, armor of wool linen and twisted leather shaping each movement, each struggle, each breath of the day. You step into the training yard before you even know what's happening, mud squishing under your boots and steam rising from the ground where last night's frost is giving way to sunrise. A farmer beside you shoves a timber shield into your hand without warning, and a bellow from the drill sergeant sends you forward in a ragged line. Your shield clatters against the next man's wood on wood, and you lock edges as if you were born to it. The shields are heavy, thicker than any door you have ever seen, and you brace the strap against your forearm, teeth clenched, as the sergeant shouts the first command. You raise your axe high above your shoulder, the head so thick it feels like a millstone dangling from a rope. The handle creaks under the weight, and already your biceps tremble with the strain. The sergeant's eyes glint with satisfaction at your discomfort. He orders you to bring the axe down on the chopping block again and again, and each swing sends a shock through your spine. Mud splatters at your feet, sprayed by the impact, and you taste grit on your lips as rain or sweat drips from your brow. You swing the axe. Lower. Swing again. Lower, the rhythm broken only by the sergeant's counting voice. You lose track of the number of blows, but remember the burn in your forearms, the stinging of cold sweat freezing on your skin, and the ache in your shoulders that promises to haunt you until dusk. Each swing is a negotiation between gravity and muscle, and gravity is winning. Still, you push on, driven by a stubborn refusal to be the weakest link in the wall of shields. At the word wall, the farmers step closer, shields forming a solid barrier of straight planks and rough-hewn edges. You press your shield against the one next to you, leather straps biting into your skin as the line tightens. The sergeant shouts for bracing, and you lock your knees, lean into your shield, and press outward. The man opposite you, a grizzled villager with a scar across his cheek, echoes your movement. Together, you form a living fortress of wood and iron, unmoving as a mountain and just as cold. Then the sergeant howls an order you did not expect. Advance. You step forward as one body, shields sliding along each other like puzzle pieces clicking into place. The yard pitches beneath your boots, ruts and puddles conspiring to twist your ankles, but you do not falter. You feel the push of the next line of trainees bearing wooden swords and practice spears, and you brace your shield wall until it groans, the wood protesting under the pressure. After several minutes of this, the sergeant calls break. The line collapses in a tangle of shields and axes, each man gasping, shoulders heaving, eyes glazed with exhaustion. You lean your shield against the chopping block and sink onto a log, every muscle in your body quivering like loose stones. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the world spin gently around you. Sweat drips off your chin and freezes on your tunic before it can fall. No sooner have you caught your breath than the sergeant slaps you on the back so hard you stagger forward. He barks for axe practice and you stumble back to the chopping block. the log awaits with another score of wood chunks screaming for cleavage. You pick up your axe again, arms trembling, and kneel to grip the handle with both hands. You taste iron on your tongue, and remember every bruise that aches when you move wrong. Swing after swing, you chip away at the log until it begins to split, fibers snapping like twigs. The sergeant grins as he watches you hack. He yells for speed, and you hack faster, adrenaline surging through the burn in your arms. Mud splashes onto the log and clings between your fingers. You choke back a curse and barge into the work until your knuckles whiten around the handle. When at last the log falls apart, you stand over the pile of splinters, chest heaving, legs wobbling beneath you. The other trainees are in the same state. Shields leaning against walls of logs, axes tossed aside like discarded toys. A sense of grim pride glimmers in the air. You realize modern gym burnout has nothing on this ancient mud bath. Every muscle in your body is alive with pain, each breath a victory over fatigue. You step away from the block and stumble toward the central fire where a bucket of lukewarm water waits. You dip your hands in and wash away the worst of the grime. The cold water stings your cuts and you gasp, teeth chattering. You rub your hands on your trousers, smearing mud and ash in long smudges until you cannot tell dirt from sweat. The sergeant calls for one last formation. Shield wall without practice weapons. You scramble to your place, shield in hand, and press your back against your neighbor's. The line is solid again, unbreakable. A testament to the grueling practice that forged you in minutes what usually takes months. You lock your knees, lean into the wall, and hold the line until your quads threaten to give out. Finally, he calls it. The shields drop with a collective thud. You drop yours with it and lean against the nearest tree, breathing so hard you taste the muddy yard in every breath. The sergeant strides past, offering a curt nod. You know that nod means respect, but also more practice, more days like this. You stare ahead, at the row of axes lined against the fence, their heads gleaming with moisture. You feel a grim smile tug at your lips. You swallow, taste grit and adrenaline, and step forward. You know that tomorrow you will do this again. Every morning you will trudge into the mud, lock shields, swing axes, and grind your strength against the land itself. There is no escape from the ache, no mercy for the weak. And as you stand in the yard, shoulders trembling with exhaustion, you realize this is the crucible that will either break you or make you more alive than you have ever been. The sun has climbed higher but offers no real warmth in the training yard. You wipe a gloved hand across your forehead and taste salt and soot. Around you, the ground has turned to a slippery mire where dozens of boots have churned snow and mud into a grey paste. You push back the hood of your cloak and blink sweat from your eyes. The sergeant stands before you, with his arms folded and his face shadowed beneath his helmet. He points toward a row of men carrying paired axes. You drop to one knee and grab the first practice axe by its iron butt. The head is dull and rounded for safety, but it still carries weight that pulls at your shoulder. You rise with a grunt and line up alongside your fellows. The sergeant barks a word, and you raise the axe overhead. The cold air catches under your arms as you breathe in. You sink into a half squat and then explode upward, driving the axe handle down with all the force you can muster. The wooden target block ahead quivers beneath the impact. You bring the axe up again and again, each blow sending a jolt through your spine. By the 10th strike, your arms are shaking so badly the axe threatens to slip from your grasp. You grit your teeth and dig your heels into the mud, willing your knees to hold. You force another swing and feel the handle vibrate in your palms. A fine spray of wood chips rises in the air with a sharp crack. You let your breath out in a hiss and knock the axe against the block once more for good measure. The sergeant nods but says nothing. He turns and points to the next drill. You lock eyes with the farmer to your right. He holds his shield at shoulder height and waits for the command. You step forward until the edge of your shield presses against his. You press your own shield outward at the same moment, testing the strength of the wood and leather. The shields scrape together in a groan of friction. You feel his hand on the inside straps slide against yours. For a fleeting second, you sense the weight of his arm braced beside yours, the promise of solidarity in the line. Then the sergeant's whistle pierces the air, and you both leap forward. Shields crash edge to edge as you advance across the yard. Each footstep sinks into the muck. You slam a shield into a barrel set as a target, and hear splintering wood. You pivot and brace at the next man's shield, as if facing an invisible enemy. Your cloak flaps wildly in the wind and catches on the edge of a sharpened stake. You wrench free with a curse and shove back into the line. After the push, the sergeant orders axe recovery. You twist to grab your practice axe and spin back into position in one fluid motion. The shield remains in your left hand, tipped slightly so you can see past its edge. You raise the axe again. The practice sweeps distant echoes of war rather than the real thing. You bring it down in a flurry of motion, cutting the air in neat arcs meant to train precision. You feel your shoulders scream in protest. Your breath comes fast, each inhale a battle against fatigue. The sergeant walks the length of the line, inspecting every blade arc, every shield angle. When he reaches you, he taps the edge of your shield with his spear tip. You wince at the sting and meet his gaze. He nods in approval and moves on. You press your lips together in relief that it was only the spear touching your shield and not something far worse. Then he calls a halt and orders recovery. The men slump forward, shields resting on the ground, axes held loosely at their sides. You wipe your forehead on the back of your wrist. The fabric is soaked with grease and sweat. You peer down at your boots and see the mud sucking at the leather, threatening to peel the soles free. You dig your heel into the ground and pry off one boot to free the worst of the sludge. Cold water bursts in through the sole and sends a jolt up your leg. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. No sooner have you righted yourself than the sergeant barks that it is time to advance in formation again. You slip your boot back on and lace it as quickly as your numbing fingers allow. You slip your axe handle into the leather loop at your hip and lift your shield. The line comes together again in a heaving mass of wood, leather, and wool. You lock shields once more. This time the sergeant tells you to pivot left as one body. You swing your foot outward, shield shifting, cloak flapping. You feel the mass of men behind you lean in the same direction. Your ankles protest against the cold. You plant your shield into the ground and pivot back. The sergeant whistles and calls for a full circle sweep. You step forward and raise your axe above your head, turning in place as if dancing with the other trainees. Each rotation you keep your shield leveled before you, a spinning wall of planks. The axe head swings with its own momentum, a pendulum of muscle. You feel wind tug at the cloak that weighs tons but moves like ragged wings. When the sweep ends, the sergeant has a final drill. He calls for shields down and axes ready. You press your shield at chest level and lift your axe for the kill stroke. He shouts and you lunge forward, thrusting the axe at a padded target held by an instructor. The foe target pitches under the blow, and the instructor stumbles back, narrowly avoiding your swing. You freeze, axe raised, then lower it with the rest of the line. The sergeant steps forward and surveys your work. He nods at your shield stance, at the deep groove you cut in the block, at the sharp arc of your axe swing. Then he turns and shouts, "Enough!" The line collapses into loose clusters of men, each gasping for air. You lower your shield and slide your axe back into its loop, the metal singing softly. A farmer next to you offers a cup of weak mead. You take it with a trembling hand and knock it back in a single swallow. The sweet liquid burns as it slides down. You feel the ache shift from arms to belly, and you let out a shaky laugh. Your fellow trainees laugh with you, a chorus of exhaustion and relief. You stand there, chest heaving, cloak drooping, boots caked in half-melted sludge. You taste mud and sweat in your mouth. You realize that each strike, each shove, each rotation has forged something in you stronger than pain. Modern gyms may induce burnout with treadmills and barbells, but here, in the muddy yard beneath the winter sky, you have sweat and bled under the bark-covered ground and found a new kind of endurance. You bring the cup of mead to your lips again and savor the taste. It is thin, but it feels earned. You press the rim of the cup against your lips and let your eyes drift across the yard, spotting axes buried in snowbanks, shields leaning against logs, the sergeant at the far end shouting new orders you barely hear. You know they will come soon and you will rise to meet them, but for this moment you simply stand in the yard, cloak heavy, shield clutched, axe at your side, tasting exhaustion and victory in equal measure. You step into the smithy and immediately feel the heat, like a dragon's breath, smacking you in the face. The air is thick with smoke and coal dust. You squint against the glare of molten metal glowing orange on the anvil. A pile of red-hot axe heads waits for you like newborn vipers hatching in flames. No full-time smith will lift a finger for your sorry blade. It is up to you to wrestle iron into shape. You tug on a pair of leather gloves, so scorched they stick to your skin like second hide. The moment you grasp the hammer handle, the heat bites through the leather and burns your palm until you roar. You clamp your teeth and lift the hammer overhead. Sparks erupt with every impact whipped off the iron in fiery arcs that sting your eyelids and singe your eyelashes. White, hot droplets land on your cheek, and you lick the burn with your tongue to test the pain. The anvil's ring fills your skull in a deafening rhythm like a war drum. Each strike reverberates through your arms, up your spine, and into your teeth, until you feel your head might crack open. You swing again, sweat and ash mixing into a fierce stripe across your forehead. You press your glove-clad hand to the mark and smear the grime into your hairline until your face is a tribal map of toil. The axe head grows flatter under your blows, but the metal fights back. It springs up on the anvil with every strike, mocking your strength. You reposition it with tongs that grate hot against your fingertips when the gloves slip. You curse under your breath as the tongs clatter, and you grip harder until another spark leaps free. You jerk your hand and nearly fling the iron across the workshop. A roar of laughter from the smith's apprentice spurs you on. You lift the hammer again and let fury guide your arm. You slam down with enough force to dent the anvil itself. The iron sledges toward the profile of a crude blade. You lift the glowing wedge and eye the shape. It is rough, but it will cut when you are done. Your palms are blistered raw despite the gloves. You peel one glove back and press the blister against the anvil to numb the pain. You grit your teeth as it bursts, and you taste salt and iron. You wipe the blood on your tunic and press on. Each hammer blow drives more heat into your hands until your fingers feel like they might melt away. You swap gloves for a pair of cloth scraps soaked in cold water from a bucket nearby. The moment the water hits your palm, the skin tightens in a fresh wave of agony. You grit your teeth and allow yourself a moment to gasp for air. When the pain subsides, you soak the cloth again and wrap it around your palm like a makeshift bandage. You lift the axe head with the tongs and set it back on the anvil. You wipe sweat from your brow with your sleeve and taste the bitter tang of metal and ash. The floor is littered with curled slivers of iron and a thin film of coal dust that glints under the forge light. You swing the hammer once more and feel the heat of the glowing iron seep into the bones of your arm. The smith steps forward and inspects your work without touching it. He nods once, then turns away without a word. You take that as grudging approval. You slip the axe head back into the fire to reheat. The flames lurch and swallow the iron until its color deepens to the shade of lava. You stare at the red glow and imagine the blade cutting through bone as cleanly as through wool. Raising the tongs, your arms tremble with the weight of both metal and expectation. You clamp the metal again and set it in a shallow groove on the further side of the anvil. You flick your wrist to center the bevel and begin hammering along its edge. Each blow hurries the metal outward toward the blade's silhouette. Sparks fly in glittering arcs and settle on your shoulders like burning raindrops. You lean over the anvil and feel the sweat drip from your chin into the ashes. You breathe deep and taste the rancid oil that keeps the bellows running. You wrap a hand around the bellows lever and pump faster, urging the fire to rage hotter. The forge roars, and the heat cycles through the workshop. You wipe the moisture from your eyes and step back as the flames flare higher. You reach for a small leather pouch tied to your belt. Inside is a handful of talcum-like powder of crushed coal ash meant to soak up the hottest glare and protect your skin. You pinch a mouthful and toss it across the axe head. The powder smolders and blackens under the heat, lending a dull sheen. You press the hammer down to flatten the near-finished metal and then inspect the curve with a nod. A shriek of metal on stone rings out as you shift the blade to the grinder wheel. You push the edge along the spinning stone, sparks erupting like fireworks. Each pass takes off tiny metal filings that float in the air and lodge in your nostrils. You breathe shallow to avoid inhaling the cloud and hold your breath when you pass the grinder past your glove. You can feel the heat against the leather, a reminder of the blade's promise. After a dozen passes, you test the edge with your fingernail. It bites the nail with a fine catch. You nod again and pat your chest, relief spreading through your chest. The blade is sharp enough to skin a deer. You sheathe the iron in a damp cloth and step back from the grinder, your arms shaking with the effort. The smith claps you on the shoulder and mutters something you swear is faint praise. You bow your head to hide the swell of pride. You wipe ash from your brow and reach for a bucket of cold water. You dunk the blade in to quench the heat. Steam hisses like a miniature thunderstorm. You lift the axe and run your finger along the edge, feeling its bite. A small nick appears in your fingertip. You curse and press the cut against your other hand, tasting the copper again as you allow the water to wash away the blood. You hang the axe on a rack, alongside dozens of others newly forged. You stand back and admire the row of blades glinting in the firelight. Each one is a promise of work and of war. Yours sits among them, born of your blistered palms and iron spark nights. Your gloves hang limp at your belt, coated in grime and sweat. You wipe your hands on your tunic until it too is stained dark with soot. Your boots are scuffed anew, and the leather straps pinch your ankles raw. You lift one foot and flex your toes, feeling the leather bite. You grit your teeth and press on until you can flex and stand without yelping. You take a deep breath, tasting ash and iron and victory. The smith turns away, already chasing the next apprentice. You pick up your cloak and shrug the wool onto your shoulders. The linen undertunic clings damp to your chest. You tug the hood into place and let the coals glow warm your face one last time. You step out of the smithy, the air cool on your new blade. You feel its weight at your side and flex your hand around the haft. The ache in your palms hums like a lived drumbeat. You lift your head to the sky, lips pressed tight, and taste freedom in the iron breeze. You are more than a thrall now. You are a maker of steel. You carry the forge's fire in your bones. You haul yourself into the narrow hull of the longship and immediately regret it. The wood creaks under your weight as if warning you what's coming. There is barely room to stand. You wedge yourself between two benches and reach for an oar. The moment your blade hits the water, you feel a violent lurch, the fjord yawning beneath you like a gaping maw. Salt spray hits your face in cold stings, and you blink through tears that taste like the sea itself. The oarsmen begin their chant and dip in unison, the roar of water slapping against wood thunders in your ears. Every dip pulls the hull forward with animal force, and you rock on the crest of each wave. You swallow hard, and the bitter tang of brine slides up your throat. You gulp air, but all you get is the echo of your own retch rising in your chest. You try to brace yourself against the gunwale. Your knuckles whiten around the wood. The spray comes again in sheets that soak your cloak and refuse to wash off the smell of sweat and fish guts from the morning catch. You taste copper on your tongue from where you bit down too hard on a leather strap in a moment of panic. You want to shout, but the wind steals your words. The horn sounds from the bow and the chant shifts in tempo. Faster now. The oars slice harder. The ship pitches up and down like a wounded beast. You stagger in place, and a wave crashes over the side, dumping half the fjord onto your chest. Cold water seeps through every layer of wool and linen. You gasp and try not to drown in the excess. Your stomach surrenders. You bend at the waist, and everything you've eaten this week, including the bits you thought gone, makes a horrified reappearance. You heave into the sea like a wounded animal. The brine burns your lips and mixes with bile in a grotesque cocktail. You break off and breathe, tasting the foul aftertaste on your tongue. You cough and taste iron. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve and watch the sea churn in your goggles. The oarsmen shift their stroke to avoid splashing you again. You glare at them, but they only chant louder, their voices ragged in the wind. The helmsman at the stern guides the rudder with slow precision, ignoring your misery in favor of keeping the longship on course through the rocky channel. Hours pass without mercy. Your limbs ache from clutching the rail. Your cloak clings like a second skin soaked through to the shift beneath. You try to swallow fresh, but there is nothing left. Your tongue swells against your teeth, and you whisper a prayer to the gods of wind and water. You beg for land. You beg to stand on anything steadier than a rolling plank. Suddenly, the fjord narrows, towering cliffs close in on either side. Water darkens beneath you, and the wind dies out as if the world holds its breath. The helmsman calls for silent strokes. Oars dip one by one in near stillness. You feel the hull glide instead of pitch. You lean over the side and peek into the depths where seaweed sways like drowned hair. You feel breath return to your lungs as the rocking stops. Ahead you see a sliver of beach, pale as bone, sloped beneath a grove of spruce. The helmsman nods and the oarsmen bring the blades home in unison. The longship slows. You duck under the gunwale and drop to your knees on the bench. Your body trembles. You press your hand against the planks and taste relief in your veins. One last wave of nausea rises in your throat, and you sprint up the temporary plank onto solid ground. You collapse on the gravel and retch again. The morning's mead and fish flatbread join the sea. You gasp for fresh air that feels sweeter than honey. Sand clings to your cloak, boots, and hair. You press a hand to your chest, feeling the jolt of your heart settling back into normal rhythms. Behind you, the longship pulls away under slow strokes. The cliffs echo with the faint chant of the oarsmen and the slap of blades. You wipe seawater from your face and taste hope. You stand unsteadily and scan the shore. A handful of driftwood promises a fire. You stumble forward, leaving the cursed rocking hull behind. You breathe in deep the scent of spruce and wet stone, and for the first time in endless hours you feel your stomach unclench. You lift your head to the sky and let the breeze dry your tears. You taste salt on your lips, but it no longer burns. You stagger onward toward the trees, barefoot on the cold pebbles, praying that terra firma holds long enough for you to remember what solid ground feels like. You stumble from the water onto the muddy bank, and immediately feel the shrill cries of alarm slicing through the dawn air. A low wooden fence lies splintered at your feet, its posts kicked aside as if by a drunken giant. Beyond you see the peasant's house, a simple timber frame with a roaring hearth, smoke plumes tangled above. You hear children wailing and livestock panicking, the high keening of geese and the frantic hoofbeats of a goat tied to a stake. Fear coils in your gut, but fury drives your arm. You clutch your axe tighter and step into the soggy yard, the soft earth sucking at your boots. A startled farmer brandishes a pitchfork, his knuckles white with terror. His eyes widen when he sees your cloak and bloated blade. You hesitate only a heartbeat before swinging your axe in desperation. The metal finds wood with a crack that echoes like a cannon shot. Splinters fly into the sky and rain down on shocked faces. The pitchfork clatters to the ground. The farmer drops to his knees and pleads without a sound. You wade deeper into the ruined homestead, water pooled in wheel ruts where grain carts once stood. A woman scrambles behind overturned barrels, clutching an infant to her chest. You see your reflection in her wide eyes and realize this is no glorious conquest. This is terror you have unleashed. You taste salt on your lips and realize it is not from the sea, but from sweat and spilled blood. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve, feeling the sticky warmth of spilled mead still festering there. A shout rings out from behind you, and you whirl around. Another farmer charges with a blunt hoe raised like a club. You bring your axe down without real aim, and the dull edge thuds into his shoulder. He staggers backwards, arms flailing, then collapses into the muck. You stand over him, chest heaving, watching the life drain from his eyes like spilled water. You curse yourself for forgetting the steadiness of your morning drink, for approaching this raid half-blind with hunger and rage. Beyond him, the barn door creaks open, and two children stumble into view. They clutch sacks of potatoes and retreat at once, their faces twisted in terror. You raise your axe in warning. They freeze, frozen as statues in a nightmare. You lower your arm and notice a glint of dawn on a broken wheel. You take a breath that feels like dragging ice through your lungs. You realize the ground beneath your feet is littered with lives upended by your choices. You press forward past the gate and find the remains of a small storeroom. Barrels lie broken, mead spilled into the earth in sticky pools. You crouch to smell it, tasting the sweet spoil that once promised warmth. Now it lies wasted, a mirror of this chaos. You wrench a lid from a ruined barrel and scoop out the last drops. You swallow it in one trembling mouthful and feel the sharp fire burn through your belly. It steadies your hand for a moment, just long enough to remember why you came. A horn blasts in the distance, a signal for retreat or advance, you do not know which. You look back the way you came and see your longship moored among reeds, oars silhouetted against the pale water. You see your fellow raiders gathering spoils and dragging terrified villagers forward. Fear and fury mingle in their faces as they split grain sacks for coin or barter. You wipe your blade on a sleeve and realize the only thing glinting brighter than steel is the panic in the villagers' eyes. You dip your axe head into the water once more and let the spray wipe away the worst of the blood. The dawn mist carries the screams of farmers and the curses of you and your brothers in raid. You turn toward the path that leads back to the shore. Each step pulls the mud from your boots and brings you closer to the gangplank of the longship. You carry your fury and your regret in equal measure, tasting the grit and realizing that this thrill of raid is nothing more than terror without glory. You pause at the edge of the yard and glance back at the ruined homestead, smoke drifting from a toppled chimney. You press your hand to your heart, feeling it pound like a battle drum. You know you will not forget these faces, this fear, this fury. You know the sea will call you again with its cold promise, but you also know the village will mark you forever. With that final thought, you step onto the plank, your cloak dripping mud and bile, and push off into the fjord, the clamor of steel and screams echoing behind you in a chorus you helped compose. You stagger back aboard the longship, dragging the warm carcass behind you. The deck groans beneath its weight, the way your ribs will groan tomorrow. A handful of your comrades crowd around the fire pit set in the center of the vessel. They shove half-charred bones into your arms without ceremony. You drop the carcass onto the planks and bend over to tear off a rib. Your teeth bite into scorching meat, and for one blissful moment you taste victory and fat and smoke, all mixed on your tongue. Then comes the crack. A sharp flare of agony shoots through your jaw as your tooth fractures on a shard of bone you failed to see. You spit a tooth fragment and grit your remaining teeth together until the pain dulls to a constant burn. You swallow a lump of gristle that catches in your throat and your chest tightens. You cough and a glob of marrow sprays from your lips like a gruesome blessing. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and taste iron and regret. Your comrade elbows you with a crooked grin and holds out another piece of meat. Pride ripples through your chest faster than hunger. You snatch the hunk and tear into it like a beast. Your jaw clenches around fat and sinew until your gums ache. You rip off the meat in ragged hunks and swallow the flesh in great gasps of breath. Each swallow forces the marrow sludge further down your throat until you feel it settle into your belly with a hollow splat. Someone tosses you a curved horn half full of warm mead. You raise it in a salute, but nearly tip over when the deck shifts beneath a rolling wave. You slam the horn back onto the planks and seize a second helping of ribs. You gnaw at the bone until the marrow resists. You snap off a corner and chew the splintered edge until your jaw cracks again. You swallow the tooth shard and taste grit and blood. You shrug and press on. The fire crackles and the coals glow red and gold beneath the carcass. You lean your weight on one hand and rip at another chunk of meat. Your stray fingers brush the hot embers and you hastily jerk them back, only to slam your thigh against the edge of the fire pit. You hiss in pain and bite down on the rib to stifle the curse. Your eyes water and you blink away a tear of frustration or exhaustion, it is hard to tell which. Your comrades clap you on the back and laugh at your grimace. They call for more meat for the broken jaw warrior, and someone tosses you a new rib hewn from the largest bone. You catch it mid-air and balance it in your teeth. You bite down, and a shriek of pain turns into a growl of triumph. You swallow the meat and smack your lips on the lintel. You take the horn again and drain the last of the mead in one draw. Your belly swells with meat and bone shards, but the hunger lingers at the edges. You nod at the nearest thrall to fetch more. When the next stripe of ribs arrives, you take them without a word. You chew through skin gristle and marrow with a grim acceptance. Each bite is a promise and a punishment. You taste ash, soot, and salt on every piece of meat. You taste the terror of the raid in the screams of those you have silenced forever. As your hands grow slick with grease and your tunic darkens with dripped fat, you take a final swallow of mead and lean back against the ship's railing. You rub your jaw and feel the jagged nick of your broken toothpress into your tongue. You glance at the horizon, and the pale light hints at tomorrow's dawn. You close your eyes and let the heaving waves rock you. You made it through another feast of roasted meat and bone shards, and for the first time in hours you feel something like satisfaction mixed with dread. Tomorrow you will ache in places you cannot name, and you will remember every fragment of broken bone and blazing grease. You will remember the taste of victory in your mouth and the taste of guilt on your tongue. You will remember that this feast was born of fear and fury, and that in the end food is food no matter how it came to rest in your belly. You settle onto a low bench carved from a driftwood trunk and pull your leather hood low over your brow. The sailcloth canopy overhead flaps in the wind like a wounded bird. Each gust rattles the supports and sends a shiver through the whole ship. You press your back against the rough wood and hug your rusty blade close to your chest for warmth. Farther up the beach, the watchfire sputters in the night air. Its glow barely reaches past the pile of driftwood that serves as a barrier against high tides. You step forward and poke at the coals with the tip of your blade. A fresh spark flies up and vanishes into the darkness. You lean over to add a scrap of kelp and watch the flames leap for a moment before settling back to their dull orange glow. The wind carries a low howl from the rocky crags above the inlet. You stand and scan the tree line where dark shapes drift between the pines. Every snapping twig sounds like an enemy stepping closer. You grip the blade until your knuckles whiten and wonder whether frostbite or wolf fangs will claim you first. You sit again and press your cheek into the hood. The leather is stiff and chilled, but it holds back the worst of the gale. Your fingers trace the grooves of the blade's worn hilt, and you remember the forge fire where you shaped the metal with blistered palms. Now the same blade feels like a silent promise against the wolves that circle in the dark. A distant howl rips through the wind and you catch your breath. The sound is closer now, and you imagine 4 glowing eyes locked on the glow of the fire. You rise in one fluid motion and grip the rail. You step off the deck onto the sand, and your boots sink into the wet pebbles. Every step echoes in the hush of the night. You hold the blade before you like a torch. The flickering firelight casts long, trembling shadows. You see a shape slip between 2 boulders at the edge of the canopy. You tighten your throat against a shout and grip the hilt tighter. Your breath comes in ragged spurts that fog the air in front of you. The wolves howl again in a chorus that seems to surround you. You glance back at the ship's deck where empty bunks lie silent. Your comrades sleep wrapped in furs and cloaks that could not save you from the cold or from wolves. You press your feet into the sand and strain to catch any sound besides the wind and the howl. A gust kicks sand against your cloak, and you taste grit on your lips. You close your eyes for a moment and murmur a prayer to the gods of sea and sky. You ask for steady hands and watchful eyes. You ask for the wind to spare you its worst chill, and for blades to stay sharp through the night. You open your eyes and see a pair of amber lights reflecting in the gloom. You step forward and raise the blade. The wolves step into the firelight on silent paws, their pelts matted with damp and frost. They stop 10 paces away and meet your gaze without fear. Your heart hammers against your ribs as you weigh the next moment. Then a great wind roars down the inlet, and the wolves step back into the shadows. You lower the blade and watch them vanish into the pines. The wind echoes in the canopy as the sailcloth snaps once more. You lean against the rail and feel the emptiness of the beach press in on you. You know the wolves will return before dawn. You shove a handful of driftwood onto the fire and watch the sparks rise like embers carrying your prayers to the sky. You sink to the sand and press the blade against your thigh to warm your hand. You close your eyes and count the wind and the waves and the distant howl. You do not sleep. You only keep watch with your heart in your throat until the first grey light bleeds across the fjord and the wolves slip back into the forest. You stagger into the longhouse carrying every layer you wore under the sky. You collapse onto a bench covered in dripping animal skins that smell of sweat and smoke. You leave your axe leaning against the wall and sink beneath the heaviest skins you can find. You keep your boots on because you cannot face another minute of cold against your bare feet. The skins mold to your shape like a damp coffin. You roll onto your side and press your cheek into fur stiff with last night's thaw. You hear the roof beams creak under the weight of fresh snow. Each groan echoes above your head like a warning that the whole thing might collapse at any moment. You stare upward through a sliver of darkness and wonder if you will die crushed by rotting timbers before dawn. A rat scurries across your blanket and you freeze. Claws scrape the skin beside your thigh. You hold your breath, half expecting the creature to bite through your cloak. The rodent pauses and you swallow the rising panic. When it scuttles away, you exhale so hard you nearly cough up yesterday's mead. You try to close your eyes, but your mind is too full of images. You feel something small and cold crawling up your calf. You jerk your leg and the skins shift, pinning you in place. You press your hand against your mouth to stifle a scream that threatens to wake the entire longhouse. You count ragged breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. You imagine your ribs crushing with every inhale. Your heart races in the hush of the sleeping halls. You hear distant snores from comrades who think sleep will save them. You envy their ignorance. You grip the skins around your shoulders and press your cheek into fur, matted with blood and lice. You taste the copper of dried sweat on your tongue. A distant horn echoes from the stern, calling you to muster. You take one last look at the shore you've raided and burned, and realize why these Norse folk traveled so far from home. Anything was better than this endless grind of cold, hunger, and grime. At least on foreign soil there was meat to steal, gold to carve, glory to claim. You heft your shield higher and tighten your grip on the axe handle. You draw a ragged breath and let it out in a low roar that tastes like defiance. You step backward onto the deck, ready to row again or swing your blade once more. You may have survived today by the skin of your teeth and the shale of your bones, but tomorrow you face the gauntlet again. In this life there is no warmth, no rest, and no mercy for the weak. You would not last another day in Viking Scandinavia, but you have made it this far by sheer stubbornness. You press your shoulders back and join the line of oarsmen rowing into the mist. Your scars ache, but your spirit flares with every stroke. You may be broken, but you are not beaten. And that, you think as the fjord closes around you, is more than enough for one day.